Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Mr. Cobalt, and in this video I'm going to show you how to identify an unknown element when you're given a certain sample that's reacting. And so in this problem, you have a metal M, we don't know what M is, and we're told that it forms a sulfate. So this is the formula for the sulfate, M2SO4 3. And we have a 0.738 gram sample of this sulfate, and we convert it to 1.511 grams of barium sulfate. Okay, and then they want to know what the identity of the metal is. Now, the way you're going to identify a metal is if you know the molar mass of the metal, you could look that up on the periodic table. So that would be a nice thing to know. So that would be our goal. We need to find the molar mass. So what do you need to know in order to find the molar mass? To know the molar mass is, so molar mass is grams per mole. So if you can find the grams of the metal that you have, and if you can find the moles of the metal you have, then you divide the two. Grams divided by moles would give you the molar mass. And then all you would need to do is look in on the periodic table for that molar mass. And then that would be the identity of your metal. So how do we find grams and moles of our metal? Okay, let's look at what they gave us. So we know that we have 0.738 gram sample of this substance here. And this substance is converted, all of this is converted into this here. So you'll notice that all of the sulfate converted to this. So all of the sulfate that was originally in the M2SO4 3 compound is converted and transferred all the way to this compound. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, they gave us the mass of this substance here. If we could find the mass of the sulfate that is in this mass, if we could subtract that out, then whatever is left over is the mass of the metal. And so we could do that. Well, let's do that. So we're going to do a mass to mass conversion. So remember the mass or the conversion highway that I've talked about many times. So when you're going from one thing to a different thing, you need to go through the chemistry conversion highway. And so that's where you're going from mass of A in grams to moles of A, right? And there you're going to need to use the molar mass of substance A. And then to go from moles of A to moles of B, you're going to use the mole, you're going to use the mole ratio of A to B as your conversion factor. And then finally, you're going to convert, in order to convert moles of B to mass of B in grams, you're going to have to use the molar mass of B. So we've got mass of our substance. This will be A. So we want to go from grams of this substance to grams of just sulfate. So let us continue. So we're going to start with grams of our substance. So we start with 0.738 grams of our M2SO4 3. We're going to put that over 1. And so our first step, in order to go from A to B, mass of A to mass of B, we need to use the molar mass of A. So we need the molar mass of this substance here. So let's go ahead and look that up. Actually, oh, I made a mistake. So we want to start with this. So my bad, my mistake. So we don't want to start with this because we don't know what M is. So that's not going to help us. So we want to start with what they gave us that we know for a fact. So my bad. So we're going to start with this amount. Since we know the metal here, we could calculate the molar mass of this. So since that is going to also have sulfate, all of the sulfate that was here ended up in here. So whatever the mass of sulfate we calculate here, that had to also be the mass of sulfate here. So we can get our answer. So we're going to start with 1.511 grams of the barium sulfate. And then we're going to have the molar mass of barium sulfate. So we'll look up the molar mass of barium sulfate. So 233. So 233. So the molar mass of barium sulfate is 233 point. Where is it? 38386. And that's grams per mole. So this many grams, we have grams on top. So we're going to put grams on the bottom. So 233.386 grams of the barium sulfate is on the bottom, and 1 mole of barium sulfate on the top. So grams cancel out, and we're giving moles. Now we're here, moles of A. But we want sulfate alone. So now we're going to do a mole ratio between barium sulfate and sulfate. And as you can see from the formula, for every one formula, you have 1 barium sulfate. So it's 1 to 1. So we're going to have 1 mole of the barium sulfate on the bottom to cancel out with moles of barium sulfate on top. And we're just going to have sulfate on the top. So 1 mole of sulfate. So moles of barium sulfate cancel out. And then finally, we can go to the mass of sulfate using the molar mass of sulfate. So we need to look up the molar mass of sulfate. Molar mass of sulfate is 96.056, so 96.056 grams per mole. That's the molar mass of your sulfate. Let me double check to make sure that's right. Yep. And so since we have moles of sulfate here, we're going to put 1 mole of sulfate on the bottom. 1 mole of sulfate on the bottom, and the grams are going to go on top. So 96.056. So 96.056 grams of sulfate on the top. So moles of sulfate cancel out. Now I have my grams of sulfate. So all I need to do is calculate, calculate the grams of sulfate. So I'm going to multiply 1.511 times 1 times 1 times 96 times 96.056. Divide that by 1 divided by 233.36. Oh, that should be 86. Sorry, I don't know. 86. So 386 divided by 1. So we don't need to divide by 1. And that's going to give us 0.62. So that's going to be equal to 0.62189 grams of sulfate. And then keeping in mind that sig figs, so we have 4 sig figs here, we have 6 here. This is exact, this is 5, so the least number is 4. So our answer can only have 4 sig figs. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 8. Keep 1 for the purpose of avoiding rounding mistakes. So we keep at least 1 extra digit. Okay, so now I have the mass of sulfate that was in the barium sulfate. All of this sulfate came from our metal sulfate. So we can subtract that mass from the original mass of the sulfate sample, and then whatever is left over has to be the mass of the metal. So let's do that. So we have 0.738 grams minus 0.62189 grams, and that's going to be equal to, give me a moment, 0.738 minus that equals, and that's going to give us 0.116109. And again, since here I have my last significant digit is an 8, my last significant digit here is in the thousands place. This is in the 10,000s place. So remember, when we are paying attention to sig figs, when you're adding and subtracting, the rule is your answer can only have the same, has to have the same number of decimal places as the least number here. So this has 4, this has 3, so that means I'm only allowed 3 decimal places, so I put a line there. So this is grams of our metal. Okay, so now we have grams of our metal. So that's half of what we need to find the molar mass. So now we have to find moles. Okay, so next, how do you find the moles of your metal? Well, since I know, where is it? Since I know the mass of our substance, we know the moles here. So here I have grams of our sulfate, right? And I know the ratio of moles of sulfate to moles of our metal given the formula. So the ratio of moles of sulfate to the moles of the metal is 3 to 2. Look at the subscripts. So the 3 out here. So for every 2 metals, I have 3 sulfates. So I can use that mole ratio to convert from moles of sulfate to moles of our metal. And so since I have grams of sulfate here, I can use my roadmap to convert from grams of one substance to moles of a different substance. So here, now I'm going to start with grams of sulfate. So 0.62189 grams of sulfate over 1. And the first step is to convert sulfate into moles using the molar mass of sulfate. So using that molar mass again. So I have grams of sulfate on the top here. So I want grams on the bottom. So 96. So basically it's the same step here, but I'm flipping the conversion factor. So 96.056 grams of sulfate and 1 mole of sulfate, 1 mole of sulfate on the top. So grams of sulfate cancels out. Now I have moles of sulfate. Now I can use the mole ratio from my formula, 3 sulfate to 2 metal. So I'm going to set that up. So for every 3 moles of sulfate, I need, so 3 moles of sulfate is equal to 2 moles of my metal. And so let's calculate that out. So I'm going to put, I have moles of sulfate on the top, so I need moles of sulfate on the bottom. So I have 3 moles of sulfate, and I'm going to put 2 moles of my metal on top. So moles of sulfate cancels out. I have my moles of metal. So now all I need to do is calculate the moles of my metal. So let's go ahead and do that. So 0.62189 times 1 times 2. So times 2 equals, and now I'm going to divide by the bottom. So divided by 96.056, and then divided by 3 equals, and I get 0.004316. And then 16, I believe. Yeah. So this is moles of my metal. So now that I have moles of the metal, I have my grams of the metal. So now all I need to do is divide grams by moles. So I take the grams, 0.116109 grams. And notice I have a line there, so that means that the 6 is my last significant figure for that measure. Divide that by the moles. What are the sig figs for the moles here? So go back to this number here. It was an 8, right? So here, the 8 is the last significant figure there. And so here I have 4 sig figs. The 0 is not significant. Here I have 5. This is exact. And so the least number is 4 sig figs. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to cap it there. So I have 0.00431616, and I keep 1 or 2 extra digits just in case. I don't want a rounding mistake. So now all I need to do is divide. So this is going to be moles. So grams divided by moles. I take my calculator and let's see here. I'm going to divide. So 0.116109 divided by that number equals, and I get 26.900. So that's going to be equal to 26.900 grams per mole. So there's my molar mass. So I have 3 sig figs here. I have 4 here. So I'm only allowed 3 sig figs. 1, 2, 3. So the final answer would be 26.9 grams per mole. And all I need to do is look that up on my periodic table. One of the things they told us is, one of the things you can figure out is the metal here. If you do your reverse crisscross, since we know that sulfate, you should know, is a 2- charge, that means that the metal has to have a 3+ charge. So it's likely that this metal would be in your third group if it's a main group metal. Now, it might not be a main group metal, but it could be a main group metal. So you might look there first, and if you look there, you'll find that the molar mass of aluminum is 26.9 grams per mole. So the atomic mass of aluminum on the periodic table is 26.9. So our metal here is aluminum. So that would be the answer. So our answer is aluminum. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that was fun and interesting for you as it was for me. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button, make a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think. And if you have any questions, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for joining me. Have a great day.